Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the R.A.U.F show. Today, you're listening to Mukhtar, and in studio today, I'm joined by Brother Faisal, Brother Yusuf, and a young gentleman who we will call Bai for the remainder of the show, inshallah. Our WhatsApp line is open, so if anybody would like to WhatsApp us any queries, questions, or comments, you can do so on 060-904-1056. Let me repeat, 060-904-1056. Today, we are going to open up the phone lines, but we'll do so in the second half of the show after the first ad break. So if anybody would like to contact us during that time, you are most welcome to do so. So, over the last few weeks, we've been discussing things, with regards to prescription medication, and we touched on a bit of the fact that this medication is sometimes abused by teenagers. And we've also touched on the fact that, during exam times, more specifically, we'll find that there's a spike in teens using certain types of drugs to try and maintain a bit of focus. Now, if you do any research and if you actually want to dig a bit deeper into this, you'll find that teens sometimes or most often turn to drugs during exam times for a few reasons. And these are things that happen just in a way to help them apparently manage stress and the pressure associated with academic performances. So, we've got Bai in the studio today. He is a youngster who has joined the R.A.U.F program. It's his first time and he's very, very shy. So we're going to run this part of the program a little bit different as compared to what we normally do. So Bai has been with us. I'm going to ask a few questions and then Bai will then answer those questions for us, inshallah. So, Assalamu alaikum, Bai. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah.
Very good. Firstly, I think for the benefit of our for our listeners out there, if you could tell us your age and your grade in school, just so they get an understanding as to how drugs affects the youth.
I'm 18 years old and I'm doing matric this year.
Very good. So, if I could ask, if we had to go back maybe a few years, at what age did you start experimenting with drugs and what drug did you use?
I think I started last year and I started with lean.
With lean? Just lean?
Yes. And okay. Xanax.
Okay, now for our listeners out there, I've got Brother Yusuf who's also fairly young and Brother Faisal who's not so much younger than me. We'll find that a lot of our youngsters today actually do experiment with lean, and they also experiment with the benzodiazepines. Commonly Xanax and a few of the other antidepressant drugs that are out there, which are either obtained legally or illegally. Now, if I could ask Bai, so you started drugs, say last year sometime, right? What made you to try lean or any drug at that point?
For me, it was the people I surrounded myself with. I wanted to fit in with them, and I thought that was like cool to do that.
Okay. And how did this experimental phase lead you into finding your way to R.A.U.F? If you don't mind me asking that question.
I think that my problem got worse, and then it came out by my mother, and she brought me to R.A.U.F.
Okay, and how did it impact your home life and school life?
I wasn't worried with school and my home life. Yes.
So just for the benefit of our users out there, remember that because Bai is still a school-going child or teenager, we are unable to keep him on a full-time basis. So what we had done is we had arranged for him to come to us on weekends to assist him in ensuring that he does, maintain the program, as well as to help him with his studies as well. Because we do have a few teachers in the center that, are with us as inpatients. So if I could ask, so how long have you been with R.A.U.F now? How long have you been attending the programs and so on?
I'm attending R.A.U.F for 9 months now.
9 months. And how has the change of surrounding an environment, especially those friends that you had at the beginning, how has that how's it changed your life now that you're no longer with those people?
I think it's way better because now I look at life in a different perspective. I have goals set for myself because before when I was with him, uh, I wanted to do what they were doing, and I never had goals set for myself. So now I'm looking at life in a different way.
And we are all quite proud of the fact that you did very well in your trial exams this year. If I could ask, how does your life now work from an academic point of view? Now that you don't have any drugs in your system, you're giving focus to school and so on. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel way better because I want to study next year, and if I was still doing drugs, this wouldn't have been I wouldn't have been able to do this.
With your experiences with the senior recoveries, right? So those people that are actually older than you in age, how has your experiences being around them or learning from them or listening to their stories, how has that shaped you into now wanting to stay away from drugs in the future?
By listening to these stories, it showed me what's the true effect of drugs. I wasn't looking at drugs in that way. I thought it was like I was in control of the drug. I never knew that what the long effects of the drug would be. So they showed me, and for me, I don't want to be in a rehab when I'm old. I want to so provide for my family and other stuff.
Inshallah, everything works out for you in the future. So, when it comes to drug abuse amongst the teens, right? So there are various reasons if you look at this from a statistical point of view, and some of those reasons are stress and anxiety relief, where examinations and can bring high levels of stress and anxiety, and some teens feel that turning to drugs may actually help them cope with these things. The other one, which is very, very common amongst the teens, and I've got Brother Yusuf who can maybe assist us with this one, is the desire for enhanced focus or energy, right? So some teens believe that stimulants, which are prescribed for ADHD, can improve focus and help them to study longer. So we need to understand that when we use, or when anybody uses these types of drugs, the effects, yes, are very short term. The focus and so on is very short term because the drug does eventually wear out. But as you mentioned, I think it was last week, the body does build up a tolerance over time, and you'll find that the person that's using these drugs will eventually start to use more. And then what does happen is this person now is changing their chemistry in their brain, knowing exactly not knowing what they're doing, but thinking it's helping them in the long run. Right, so that's also a very, very big side effect where the brain chemistry actually does change. And then, as Bai mentioned just now, peer pressure. If people are in their social circles and they are using drugs and they are using these things to perform, during the exams and sport and so on and so forth, we will find that the child or the people that are in there are now sucked into this vacuum. And in this world, it's all about the good times and, we take this medication to help us look good, feel good, do good, not realizing that these are all things that actually are harming you in the long run. And by doing all of this, changing brain chemistry, using or substituting medication or drugs to actually try and improve their mental state, what they are actually doing is stunting their coping mechanisms. So we all have the ability to actually understand hopefully understand most of our emotions, and most of the time try and use better judgment. But when a person is now starting to use medication to actually do these things, they lose the coping mechanisms which are actually given to them, right, or which we are actually born with. And these things can actually now have a bigger effect because you're now sitting in a situation where you have people that are youngsters that are growing up into adulthood or going into adulthood, and they are looking and leaning more towards those people that have anxiety issues, depression issues, and so on and so forth. And then also the perceived academic pressure. So we as parents, and I'll say this for myself first because I've got 2 children that are starting exams this week, We sometimes don't realize the amount of pressure that we put our teens under, or our youth under, when it comes to performance during, at school. We need to also, as parents, understand that as much as our kids, we want the best for them, we also need to know that they are good at certain things and not good at everything else. So we need to know our children, and the only way we can know our children is by actually being there and understanding them, spending the time that is required for us as parents to actually be with them. But at the same time, this is not a let off for those kids or teens that are listening to the show today. You as a child have the responsibility to actually ensure that you do your best. And doing your best doesn't mean just opening a book and sitting there, but doing your best means paying attention in class from day one. I mean, if I were to ask by now, right, for any advice, if you have any, for any of the children out there that are starting exams, from grade 8 up until grade 11, or even those matriculants that are actually currently writing exams, what advice would you give to them now, knowing that you have experienced all that you have experienced? How would you now ask them to make their lives any better? Or what changes would you ask them to make in their life?
What I would say is keep yourself in good company, because surround yourself with smart people, because they can help you in the subject that you're battling with. And you need to know what you want to do after school, after high school, because it gives you the drive to do better in school. And lastly, I want to say is you need to pay attention in grade 10, 11, in grade 10 and 11, because this helps you in grade 12. Yes.
Thank you for those words, Pai. We are on the topic of teens using drugs. I think Faisal wants to say something. No, Faisal doesn't want to say anything. He's sitting behind me, so I can't see him. Brother Yusuf, you want to say something?
Okay, just to what my perspective is on so far what we've chatted about would be that when it comes to certain substances like your weed and marijuana, that you may think can calm down your pressure or make things more relaxed because you put under so much stress in this time. The truth is, maybe it'll feel that way right now, but long term, you're going to find yourself more lazy, able to think straight, and that will lead to your downfall. I know that personally from someone who was highly academic and did well until I fell into that circle and used those types of substances, and my marks and my drive fell through. And for more of the prescription medication, in my experience, you find those substances like Ritalin, while it may enhance something right now, long term, once those substances don't do the same thing, you find yourself reaching for harder substances that are very similar, like cocaine. So those things never work. So I think now, where I'm coming from as still a student in college, under a lot of pressure still, because I have a job and I'm studying, I find that my comfort and my drive comes from my family support and my spirituality. When things get tough, when things become a lot, which is like that for students and everyone else, you sit down and you reach out to your creator, and it brings you something that no substance will ever do.
Jazakallah for those words, Yusuf. I'm just reading this, the research that I've done here for the show today, right? Because, this information is something that, I'm quite old now, so to remember what I did during my academic years is very far away. So, if you look at, as you mentioned just now, you can take certain drugs, and it may give you a certain false sense of focus or relaxation. They often have long-term effects as well. And one of the long-term effects, for example, if you look at one of the risks of a person or a child or a teen that's using medication or drugs, to maintain a bit of focus and so on. If you break it down, one of the risks is cognitive impairment. Right? So drugs like stimulants or cannabis can initially create a false sense of focus or relaxation, but they often impair things like memory, concentration, and decision-making abilities in the long run. This actually hinders academic performance rather than improving it. So what we think is now helping us today is actually making us a bit more silly tomorrow. I mean, for lack of a better word, silly is the only word I can use on radio, but it makes us a bit more, special in the long run. Then there are physical health risks. For example, different drugs come with various different health risks. Stimulants can increase heart rate and blood pressure, potentially leading to cardiovascular issues. Sedatives or opioids can depress breathing, leading to overdose if misused. And study drugs prescribed for ADHD can also cause things like insomnia, headaches, and other physical symptoms. And then it goes further. I mean, there's mental health effects here as well. Students that are using these types of drugs also have an increase in anxiety and depression, and even lead to addiction, especially if used as a coping mechanism. So the coping mechanism part, I think here it's very important for our caregivers, our parents, our loved ones, to actually allow each other to have open communication. Because you'll find if you speak to any drug addict or any person in recovery, what happened? Why did you take drugs? No, I didn't have anyone to speak to. I bottled up my emotions, and as a result, these things built up to a point where they had to find some other alternative way to cope. Drugs also alters brain chemistry, which may worsen stress or anxiety over time, creating a cycle of dependency and diminishing returns. Obviously, the risk of addiction is always going to be there. Sleep disruption is also something that happens, because you'll find, depending on amount of or usage, you'll find that the person who's using these drugs wouldn't be able to sleep properly, because these drugs are now high, low, high, up, down. So their brain eventually starts to lose, the cycle of sleep. Also, poor decision making. Drugs impairs judgment, increasing the likelihood that teens might make poor choices. They may engage in riskier activities that they normally would, like mixing drugs with alcohol, driving while impaired, or taking higher doses to enhance effects, all of which can be dangerous or even life-threatening. And then also, diminished long-term success. While drugs may seem to help in the short term, they often come with a decline in performance over time. The brain's altered functioning can make learning and memory retention harder, which undermines not only immediate test results, but also long-term return with regards to goals and future career prospects. So, these are just some things that if anybody were to research, they'll find this information there. But these are things that our children today are actually using. And if you look at if you go back and listen to what Bai was saying, as to why he started taking drugs, right? Yes, he's mentioned peer pressure, but ultimately the choice was his own to do the drug, right? Now, if you look at going forward, we are now in November. School exams are starting, tomorrow for most schools. Matric exams, some of the schools have already started, right? So, in fact, all of them have already started, and you'll find that the next phase from this is already now going into things like, after examination parties, breakout parties, and so on and so on. And this leads us down a path which is actually very, very dangerous. If I ask Bai, we were talking about this just before we came into the studio today. I asked him, so in grade 11, which was last year, right? What were you planning, or did you have any plans in place, not specifically saying anything, but did you have plans in place to have a big after matric examination party? And his answer was?
Yes.
Exactly. So this is now something that our teens and our youth are actually keeping in the back of their mind, because they're now saying, listen, we're in grade 11 now, we're the big boys or the big girls in the school, we're going to be in matric next year. So after matric, we've had a long year. Even though it's a fairly short academic year, we've had a very long year. We now need to go out and have a party. And I'm sitting and I'm just remembering Brother Faisal actually had a personal experience. Tell us a bit about that experience before we stop for the ad break, Faisal.
The preparations before.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it all starts. Before you even go into your exams, before you even start preparing for your exams, you're already preparing for the after party. What's going to come, how you're going to celebrate once those exams are finished. And that's sort of where it all started for me. Even though I was focused on doing well in the exams and doing everything to get the best results, the main focus was on what was going to come after that. Getting everything organized, putting together a group of friends. We had planned a trip to Cape Town. setting up our itinerary, everything we're going to do, where we're going to go, how we're going to spend our time. And straight after the exams, we flew off to Cape Town, and that's where the party began. But the main thing is that for a lot of our youngsters, they're in that position now where they're already thinking of that. What they're going to do for their December, January period, how they're going to celebrate all their hard work they put into their exams, thinking that they deserve this now, because that's what's in their head, right? I put all this hard work in, now I can celebrate, I deserve this. And that's a very dangerous place to be in. So that's where parents need to be more aware of the fact that don't think now that you need to give in to your children because they did well. This is the time to be so much more aware of what they're doing, what they're planning, and what's going to happen during this December period.
Jazakallah for that, Brother Faisal. We're going to stop for a quick ad break. And when we get back, inshallah, we'll open up the phone lines as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the R.A.U.F show. You're listening to Mukhtar. In studio, I'm joined by Brother Faisal, Brother Yusuf, as well as Bai. We're calling him Bai because he is quite young and he doesn't want anyone to know his name. And also, we're talking about things like the teens that are starting to use drugs during examination time, or those that are currently using drugs during examination time. So Bai gave us a bit of his background, via answering a few questions. And essentially, if I could wrap it up or just bring it all together, Bai started drugs at the age of 17, which was last year, in grade 11. And he's currently in grade 12 and he's 18 years old. He has joined the R.A.U.F program now for 9 months. And what we are doing to actually help him is to actually allow him to come into the center every weekend, where he's able to have study time for himself, completely undistracted study time, no bad friends, no peer pressure anywhere around him. So when Bai did start taking drugs, he was actually introduced to something called lean. I'm not going to go into the makeup of lean, but I'm sure most of our youngsters out there today know how it's made. And I think it's actually very important for our caregivers, our parents, to actually understand how it's made by getting yourself enlightened. Please contact us at the office to actually come to a program so you can learn about these things, because if you start to find that your cough mixture is missing a bit faster than normal, then you've got a problem at home. So also with that, we discussed a bit of the dangers of teens abusing drugs. With regards to things like cannabis, stimulants, how it affects them long term. And even though there may be a false sense of some achievement now, it's always going to get worse later on. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, today we are opening up the call line or the phone lines. If anybody would like to phone in and ask a question or leave us, make a statement or a comment, you are most welcome to do so. Our number to call in is 061 904 904. Let me repeat, 061 904 904. Alternatively, if you prefer WhatsApp, you can do that as well. 060 904 1056. Let me repeat, 060 904 1056. So just before the ad, we touched on something that is coming up for most of the people out there, this part of the year. So this part of the year is a very dangerous part of the year when it comes to any person who's in recovery, or any person who's hanging out with the wrong people, or any person who feels that their willpower is not strong enough to actually stop them from making the wrong decision. Now, Brother Faisal told us a bit about how, and also Bai told us a bit. No, Bai didn't tell us yet, but he told me during the ad break. Faisal told us how he planned, his end of matric party a long time before matric even started. So I'm gonna ask Bai now, right? So last year you were in active addiction.
Yes.
I don't want to ask what you did, because we all pretty much have an idea as to what happened. But how did you celebrate after your grade 11 exams last year?
I celebrated by going to parties and clubs.
So this year being now your first December, clean.
Yes.
And also after writing, some would say, your most important exam
Yes.
in your academic life. What do you think you do differently, and how do you feel about it? I know it's a bit premature to ask this question while you're still stressing about matric,
Yeah.
but I mean, how does December feel to you?
I think I'm excited that I'm gonna finish high school, but I'm also stressful at the same time because I want to study next year, and my mind is only focused on my studies. So I'm not worried about December.
Very good. So I've got two a bit more senior recoveries in the studio with me today who've got a lot more senior clean time as compared to Bai. I'm gonna go with the junior of the seniors, who's clean for a while now. How does now going into December, make you feel knowing what you have done in the past, Brother Yusuf?
I think when you have seen the other side of things and now you're coming through with a different pair of eyes, it's not as attractive knowing what has happened to you, knowing the results of what looks like fun and games and all this hype surrounded around it. When you have the results of it, it no longer creates much for you. So I think once you enjoy a different part of life, and I think only a recovery truly understands how life feels so different when you're coming from that position and now you're in a normal position. What a normal person will see the normal December vacation as compared to how you feel living out your normal life coming from that place. It's just so much more happiness than when you felt like you needed your happiness through certain substances or certain
Substitute happiness with a drug.
lifestyle.
Brother Faisal, you're clean for longer than Brother Yusuf. How have your Decembers and New Year's changed? Are they even called December and New Year's anymore?
No, not necessarily. To sum it up, it's I try to treat it just like the rest of the year. But this period of the year, it's starting in November, December, Jan. It's a period where generally everybody wants to enjoy themselves, and it's a festive, joyous period. For some people, for other people, it becomes a period where they become very reckless. During this time, our youngsters, we started talking about the students first. This is the time where they start experimenting, right? And this could be the beginning for them of a long career in drug addiction, which they don't realize when they're so young. This is where it all starts. So for some, this is where they start experimenting. For others who have already started experimenting during the year, and already have exposure to substances, this is the time where they start using more. So this is a period where everything is hustling and bustling, and they get so much more exposure, and they start using a lot more drugs. Then you get the other side of the coin for people like us who are in recovery, where during this time it's a lot more likely that you can relapse, right? Because it's so easy to get consumed by the festive period. Everybody's relaxed in a joyous mood, and you're so much more exposed to temptation, so much more than any other time of the year. It's so easy to relapse. So it's very important to be on your guard, right? But again, it depends where your head is at, right? So for me, I try to maintain the same routine that I did throughout the year. Spend time with your family, people you trust, and surround yourself with people that love and care for you, right? Don't put yourself in any risky situations. And make sure you maintain your programs. So keep doing what you are doing throughout the year, and you'll be okay. You'll come out on the other side.
And just to add to that, the R.A.U.F program is not very far away. from wherever you may be in Cape Town or Joburg or Durban. So it's never too far that you need to go to find the R.A.U.F program. So our topic for today is actually teens and their abuse of drugs during examination times. But the reason we actually mention the after examination party and so on is because this whole thing, it doesn't happen just the day before they're starting exams. Our children out there that are writing exams have plotted this move, if I can use those words and that phrase, for a long period of time. They've already tried it, most of them. They've during other exams. And Bai is here. If I'm wrong, you tell me, right? Yusuf, you as well. And Faisal, you can also correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mind. You'll find that experimentation doesn't happen today. It's something that's been going on now for a while. It may not be as often as it is now during this part of the year or this part, when it's exam time. But you'll find that this experimentation has taken place previously for the kids to actually know. You can take this drug, it'll help you to focus. You can take this drug, it'll help you to stay awake. You can take this drug, it'll help you to remember things, because in a way it's like slows down time. If you have the conversation, that's how the responses or the type of responses you'd get. And you'll find that these things have been happening maybe for a couple of months, maybe for a few years, but like I say, not as often as you'd find currently. So it's important, and this is where our caregivers come in. I think it was mentioned last week as well. If you find a wrapper of a medication or a tablet card that doesn't make sense, you need to go and see your pharmacist and ask them, what is this for? And also, don't be afraid to actually go and get a drug test done, because those things will actually tell you what your kids would most likely lie to you about. So with regards to drugs during the exam period and going into this part of the year, I mean, if the child, as Bai mentioned, as Faisal mentioned, if the child or the children are actually planning their after party a year in advance, how long do you think they're planning to try that drug before they actually take it? How many times do you think they had to be in that situation or scenario that, listen, I've got this thing, let's try it today. I've got this thing, let's go out and we can do it today, type of thing. How many times that conversation has been asked, or that question has been asked to our kids? And we as parents need to understand, as caregivers, we need to know that no matter how good a parent we feel we are, at the end of the day, we may not be doing enough to actually ensure that we know where our children are, and not knowing enough, or not doing enough to ensure that we understand who our kids are with, and then from there also at the same time not putting that much pressure on them, since they actually need the space as well. So I just got a small question on here. Slams, please advise 75-year-old stopped smoking Dhaka since a year now, has been smoking from a very, very young age. I would like to know if there are any withdrawal symptoms to worry about. So, anonymous, I'm not going to mention if you're a male or female, because I'm not sure if you want to keep it anonymous or not. Most withdrawals take place within the first couple of days to a maximum of maybe about 10 to 14 days, right? So if this person has stopped smoking Dhaka a year ago, there should be no conversation with regards to withdrawals or anything, because they're now clean for a year, so there shouldn't be any symptoms to worry about in that regard from a withdrawal point of view. What you may get, as Brother Yusuf so rightly pointed out, is you may get the psychosomatic symptoms, where the person may feel that in their head they need this thing to actually calm themselves down, or to stop feeling the aches and creaks of old age, or to sleep better. And it's a placebo effect. Brother Yusuf, you want to add anything to this, or anything to the conversation with regards to teens and drug use or experimentation?
Okay, well, since you are mentioning the type of students you'll get in this time and how they'll plan, I think you get a few different categories in my observation. You get the students that have been doing drugs for some time, and ones that maybe are daily users, ones that are occasional users, and then you get your students that haven't. So you find that those groups tend to become more excessive during this period, trying harder and newer substances. And then you get the ones that haven't now being exposed, and a whole new whole new group of drug addicts are created during this time period, because now they either willing or feel that they allowed to, since they work so hard, they achieve, they never did anything wrong before, that we're gonna try it once, we're gonna experiment it, and then, you know what, finish and done, we're gonna continue with our life. But that's not what always happens. It's very unlikely that that's what always happens. And you get, like Brother Faisal said, addicts that have now taken up a career of drug addiction just because they said in this time period we're gonna just have some fun and then we're gonna carry on with life after that. But it just doesn't go that way.
You know, I was just reading something earlier on, and you know, and this is maybe where we need to learn that, you know, break the cycle. So a lot of us understand that, especially for those that I have experience with R.A.U.F. I mean, everybody in this room does. We'll find that sometimes you'll be the only drug addict in your entire family, and your entire family is made up of very good people. Not to say that you're a bad person, but your entire family, no one did drugs, right? But surveys have said that what happens is when a person is a drug addict and they live their life without finding sobriety, more often than not, they will birth another drug addict. And the cycle will continue in that regard, right? Because, I was telling a brother on Friday, a little bit off topic where we are today, but I was telling a brother on Friday that he is smoking cannabis, right? And he's got a young daughter and a young son. So what we need to understand is the example that he is setting and the example that we are setting as adults is the same example that our children will follow. So if you look at a person that wants to experiment or live a party, like, I know I've heard this many times before where people say, I have a boys' weekend once in 6 months, right? Or a girls' weekend once in 6 months. Right, and you will find that in this weekend when they are gone away from their families, it's an all-out party, right? And this becomes the norm where everything is okay, everything's allowed. It's no permission granted for this weekend. But we don't realize that this is the example that we are giving our daughters, because they will come back and say, but listen, that's the example my father gave me or the example my mother gave me. So this is either right for me to bring home as a husband or right for me to behave in that specific manner. And it's the same thing for our sons. We are now saying, listen, this is how a man should behave, or this is how a woman should behave. And as a result, now they now have this thing in the back of their head where this is how they can behave, or this is how their wife or future wife can behave before they bring them home. So it's very important that we understand that, because this is something that leads up. I mentioned this before a few minutes ago, that the teenagers or the kids that are planning to do something this part of the year have planned this thing out for a while before, or a while back. As I go back to the example of the parties after matric and after exams, it's been planned for a while back. So it's the same thing with regards to how you do how you work into recovery. You have to ensure that we as caregivers understand that there is a role for us to play in this regard. The youth have a role to play and the caregivers have a role to play. If the caregivers are not going to be there, allowing the children to grow up the way they need to, giving them that space that they need to, to express themselves in, and also enlightening themselves, studying, coming to support to programs, understanding how drugs can affect the youth, then what else are we doing? I mean, we had COVID a few years ago. Right, and reading now that I've actually been doing a lot more in-depth research with regards to how drugs affect certain people at certain ages, you will find that, for example, an opioid, right? An opioid, I'm not going to mention any name, but it's a drug, right? An opioid is the legal term for the drug, and obviously the illegal ones will be things like your heroin and rock and sugars and so on. Those things depress your breathing, meaning they actually slow down your breathing. Now, if you had to have another pandemic, or if this person were to pick up an illness like bronchitis or TB, this person is at a higher risk of actually passing on. So we need to keep that in the back of our mind, because as youngsters, what we're doing is we're damaging a very healthy body by taking these things in. I think we have a caller on the line. Just gonna see if someone is there. Okay, while we're trying to get that caller back, let's continue. So what happens is our youth actually take these things, and this thing now starts to have a negative effect long term, and this now starts to lead to other illnesses as well, because we don't realize that the drug stays in our system for long after it's gone. I mean, we end up with situations where, I'll give you an example. I'm not sure if anybody in this room knows or remembers. There was a child that was actually born with withdrawal symptoms, because the parents were users. We do have a caller on the line. I'm just going to do this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm actually the parent of one of the recovering addicts that was just on the radio.
Gee.
And I'm calling in to just for the parents that's listening, like if you do have a son or like a teenager or something, and when you recognize the warning signs of like sleeping a lot, or like giving your child too much freedom, just not to be scared to reach out, for help for your son's future, and not worry about other people, and for help. I'm just telling that you need to be that parent. Don't be like a weak parent. Empower yourself, and that will help you to do all of that.
Jazakallah for that phone call and those words of encouragement. I see he's sitting here and he's smiling because I know who's on the phone. If I could ask, obviously you've given some wonderful advice with regards to parents coming out and reaching out. What other advice would you give to the youth or to the parents out there with regards to having a person or a child in the home that's now starting to show the symptoms of withdrawing from the family unit?
There is ways, there's help, there's things, there's ways to deal with it. You're not alone, you're not the only person. There's ways, there's help. You just need to do it. Don't worry about people. Go to that R.A.U.F, go to the meetings, empower yourself. It will make you stronger. It will help you deal with, it will make you understand your situation. How to put it. The R.A.U.F teaches you how to put things into place. Yeah, and that just made my life so much better, and my relationship with my son, and the understanding that I had. I gave him so much freedom. That is the mistake of parents nowadays. The freedom you give your child, the people that you just let the child go hang out with because they need to have fun and stuff like that is not the way. It ends up in a whole different situation. So before it gets to that, when you feel when you get that warning signs, your son is sleeping a lot, the attitude, the manners is changing, just take note of it. Don't let that pass you by. That is all to wake up. The red flag.
Jazakallah for that. We're almost at the end of our show, so I'd like to just round up by saying to everybody out there, for our caregivers and for our youth, if any of them are actually listening, because I hope they should be studying. So, with regards to, as the sister mentioned, if you have a child that's now starting to show signs that are abnormal as compared to what they're supposed to be, seek assistance, seek help, get the information that's required, and then take the necessary steps to actually help that person or that child. When it comes to us as caregivers, whether we're SGB members, whether we're principals of schools, whether we're owners of companies, whatever the case may be, remember R.A.U.F has awareness programs where we will come to you free of charge. All you do is give us a date and time, and we're there. We address whoever is there, and then from there we impart knowledge wherever we can. And you'll be surprised how many children in your schools may actually want to speak about things that they are afraid to speak of to the parents or to their teachers at school. If anybody would like to contact us for the nearest support group program, you can do so on 031 269 3662. Let me repeat, 031 269 3662. And yeah, that's our office number. You can get hold of them there. Also, just for anyone that has the R.A.U.F cell phone number, that number has been recovered, so it's no longer hacked. You can still contact that number if you do have it. We are available on Facebook, Instagram, as well as YouTube, and we are actually working on something which will be coming as a surprise, hopefully not too far in the future. I do hope you support us in this endeavor as well. With those words, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.